Where are the prayers? Yeah. All right. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. I pay homage to the sublime Mother of the victorious ones of the three times, the inexpressible, inconceivable, and indescribable perfection of wisdom, which is unborn, unceasing, and of the nature of space, and which is the object of realization of the self-knowing primordial wisdom. Okay, great. I don't have, oh yeah, I use this one as well, right? I should use the microphone, should I?
If you're comfortable, if you...
Can you hear me well in the back? Do you prefer me to put this on? It's better. Okay, right, okay, I'll do that. Okay. Now, as some of you may notice, the ones who are in the discussion group, the Uma discussion group, there's been some hot discussion going on. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but there were some interesting ideas I thought to just shortly mention. Let me just check. Let me put some, yeah. So, Banu, he had this comment, remember, about if nothing exists objectively. What does that actually mean? Do things exist objectively? I mean, when we mean objective existent on an ordinary worldly kind of way, what does it mean? It kind of means free from feelings, emotions, prejudices, interpretations. But here, of course, objective means to exist without, independent of mind. That's really the meaning here, independent of mind, or even more so, independent of labeling by the mind from the Prasangika school point of view. That's what it means. So then Banu says, well, he agrees, we don't experience an objective reality. Our brain, he says, and I would add the mind, facilitates the creation of a subjective experience. So the mind facilitates that, okay. And then he says that external reality is common for all, but the way we experience it is not common for all. Huh? It's common for all, but then how we experience it. I mean, I get what he's saying. There must be something out there, basically, that has nothing to do with my mind. But that's exactly what is not possible from a Buddhist point of view. What would it be that's out there that none of us perceives, not even conceptually, right? That would be common to us all. How can it be common to us all if we don't perceive it? All our experiences, as he says, are subjective, individually different. Now, I understand why he says there's something that is in common for all of us. In the sense, I think he's saying, well, we all agree that this is a chair over there, or this is a table. But that's just because we use the same word. What we individually perceive is very different, simply because of the perspective we are having. And again, we don't know whether the hues, the colors, the different shades of color are the same, or whether we all see the same colors. We just call it the same, right? Of course, modern physics comes in especially in the Prasangika school. Modern physics don't work for the Sautantrika school. I remember Aidan argued many years ago about what about like just light waves and colors and so forth. And I was wondering, how does the Sautantrika do it? But I think the Sautantrika doesn't agree with that idea. Let's just say there's blue out there the way it appears. They have that sense there's this objective world out there, truly out there, and it exists the way it appears to us. The Prasangika school is very different. They say conventionally, yes, there's blue, there's yellow, and so forth, but it doesn't exist objectively. Conventionally, yes, we perceive blue, we say it's blue. There's no problem, there's no contradiction when it comes to worldly conventions. I'm going to get more into this in a moment. Does that make sense? So, first of all, like there's something out there we all have in common. Well, yeah, without analyzing, we would all say, yeah, there's a table. But if we really look closer, what we perceive is something very different. We just agree on the term. And thinking of other sentient beings, they don't even see a table. We see a table, but other sentient beings, they don't know about table. Does that make sense? It's really difficult that to make those two work. That on one hand we say there is an external existence, there's something externally existent, but that doesn't exist objectively. We do agree on certain common objects, but that doesn't mean that these are not totally subjective. Am I making sense? We'll get more to it once we get into the 6th chapter, but just because it came up. Then, okay, there's something else I'll mention in a moment. Jimmy then talked about the mind-only view. He mentioned the mind-only view. Why is this not correct? What is it? It puts too much emphasis on the mind. Okay, while accepting that everything exists inherently. So that's really their view. There's too much emphasis on the mind. They deny external existence, and of course they accept that everything exists inherently. That's the problem. But I said that many times in the past, just repeating what many of my teachers have said. We never, when we studied the Prasangika school, move away from the Prasangika, from the mind-only school, as much as we may expect. So it's not like there's certain aspects we take on. The importance of the mind. Without mind, objects couldn't exist. There's definitely no objective reality out there. Without mind, you couldn't have it. So it's not exactly mind only, but it's not going all the way back to the Sautantrika either. So it sometimes seems you would negate more when it comes to the Chittamatra school, and we'll discuss it in more detail in the 6th chapter. But for now, yeah, it's pretty close. Prasangika is kind of close to mind only, but nothing exists inherently, and it's not like the mind has a more real reality. I mean, a reality that is more real than that of external phenomena. It's equally lacks inherent existence. So in the mind-only school makes it sound as if there's nothing out. I mean, as if like, first of all, there's nothing out there. In the mind-only school, there's nothing out there. And all there is mind. Right? That is a problem. Because conventional truth, and Tomer and Bernd also talks about it. Yeah. So Bernd also says it, and Tomer basically saying, what about the conventional truth? How can you make... before I get into what Bernd says, but what about the conventional? That's a huge problem. In the mind-only school, what is the cause of a tree? Well, actually it's the mind, right? So what about the soil, the seed, the sun and so forth? Yeah, they have to kind of accept that. But if all that appears to your mind, that specific tree that just appears to your mind, has it arisen from soil and water and all that? Well, actually, it's just an appearance. It's like a dream tree that just pops up in your mind. Really, that's what they say. They use the dream example over and over, saying just as you're in a dream, just things pop up. So just like that, the tree is not the cause of your. They talk about eye consciousness. right? They say there's an I consciousness, but it doesn't have the sense faculty. Like, there's no physical sense faculty, first of all. It's just an imprint ripening in the mind. And the mind and the object's existence are simultaneous. The moment the imprints ripen, so first the imprint ripens, and then a moment later you have both the object and the mind. Simultaneous. Not like first you need a tree and then you can see it. No, that's not how it works. So you see, that really contradicts conventional truth. So what about their causes and conditions? That particular tree exists. It's they talk about like, when you analyze, everyone has their uncommon perception of reality. When you analyze. When you don't analyze, you say, oh, we all see the table. They have this beautiful terminology. Without analyzing and examining, there is a common object. The table. When we all agree, we see a table. But when analyzing and examining, or analyzing and investigating, there's only a unique object. Actually, the Prasangika school has to say that too. The Prasangika school, so that terminology is very beautiful. It sounds more beautiful in Tibet. I find that it's so helpful. It makes so much sense to me. However, the problem with that assertion is, it's true. I mean, this is what the Prasangika asserts as well, has to assert. Yeah, we agree this is a table, but in the end, what we all perceive is very different. But the problem with the Chittamatra is that we're all dreaming a similar dream. We're all dreaming a similar dream. So there's no conventional object where a table was made by, in this case, a carpenter. There's wood and so forth. Conventionally, you have to accept that. And that is accepted as part of the conventional truth. The Chittamatra school has a really difficult, because if you don't see it, it just comes from your imprints. That is, like that particular tree, you just suddenly see, like you're walking around, you see a tree, they say it's just because of the ripening of an imprint. And you don't need the ripening of an imprint of that tree's seed and that tree's gardener and or the person who planted the tree and so forth. So actually it doesn't have those causes, strictly speaking. You see? So exactly as Thomas says, yes, so you need a conventional truth. You need a conventional. Of course, there is a conventional truth, and that is explained better by the other schools. It becomes much more difficult. Bernd says there's a problem with the mind-only school, that you may believe there's only my mind. Yeah, but that's a misunderstanding of the mind-only school. That's just misunderstanding it. But you're right, the danger is there. That's the danger. You may think, there's just my mind. But from the point of view of the school itself, they say, of course, there's lots of minds. But it seems hard because we can't really communicate. I mean, we think we communicate, of course. It's like, yeah, let's say we're now mind only, so we're communicating. But when I look at my own hands, or I hear my own voice, that's just the ripening of imprints. That's just the ripening of imprints. And you happen to, in that moment, also have similar imprints ripening in your mind. So that gives us the impression we're communicating. It's almost like we're communicating in the dream. We're all dreaming. No one is talking, but we're dreaming we are. And we happen to do it at the same time. It's just really difficult, isn't it? So we can end up thinking there's just one mind. That's, of course, not what the mind-only school is all about. They do say there are many minds, but the danger is there, right? Then he also says, so you have these two views, basically. When we start off with the Vaibhashika and the Sautantrika, they believe, those are the first lower schools, they believe there's this external objective world and that exists truly, independently of mind. And that's how we look at the world, right? Emotionally, it feels as if this world out there is this objective world, it exists truly. It's a Buddhist school. Of course, they introduce Buddhist ideas such as selflessness and so on, but they don't tackle the external world. They don't talk about phenomena outside of myself except for persons. Other than that, everything around us exists the way it appears. So Satantrika, there's blue over there. Don't come me with some weird physicist that tells me there isn't. They wouldn't accept that. So the reality as it appears to us, the things around us, they exist the way they appear. It's a really beautiful way to gently take us towards some of the more difficult views. So no one is going to touch. In the beginning, when you study these two schools, especially the Satantrika, you start very much with the Satantrika. The first topics you study is always based on Satantrika. And we're told that the self doesn't exist the way it appears, the truth of suffering, all that is explained. But very conveniently, what is left out is saying that phenomena, the way they appear to us, the external phenomena, that they don't exist that way. No one touches that. So it's okay for us. We're gently introduced to these ideas. And then the next school is the Chittamatra. So from one extreme, everything exists truly out there. They say, nothing exists truly out there. Only the mind does. Right? So the mind and the appearances to the mind. That's all there is. So you see how from one extreme, suddenly you're thrown right into... So the gentle approach has now taken on a more drastic version, where basically if you follow that progression from Satantrika in particular to Chittamatra, which is not always the case, it depends on which subjects you study, but let's say you take it according to that order, you go the other way. Totally the other way, like only mind. Which is psychologically quite effective, because so far we haven't focused that much on the mind. Yes, in the Satantrika school we learn about the functions of the mind, we learn about never suggested, except they define existence, which is known by mind. Okay, but I remember when we studied that, it didn't have a great impact on me. Like, yeah, okay, it must be known by someone to exist, but it's not saying I need to know it. It's okay if a Buddha knows it, and about Buddha is omniscient, so who cares? Or knows everything at least, right? So that wasn't a big problem. It was just gently, but then mind only, nothing out there. Nothing exists out there. Just mind. And once you've kind of covered these two schools, then comes the Madhyamika school that says nothing exists truly, whether external or the mind. And now they're equal again. Now they're equal again in that the external world doesn't exist independently or doesn't exist truly, but neither does the mind. Yeah? So they now negate an absolute ultimate existence with regard to everything. All right, that was just a simpler version of these four schools. Anyway, having said all that, Bernd then says, we had that whole discussion about materialism, the dangers of materialism, focusing too much on the materialistic world. And then what would be an opposite of materialism, like the mind-only school. Though I'm not saying that the Satantrika school are materialists, but materialists will basically agree with the Satantrika school that everything exists externally out there, the way it appears to us. And unless we are hallucinating, well, blue and everything is just out there. That would be the traditional materialistic view. Yeah, so then the mind-only school is really helpful. He's saying, because the materialistic view, that's at least what I thought he says, correct me if I'm wrong, but you slip back into believing inherent existence if you have that view of everything is out there independently and so forth, like the materialistic view. And I agree. So they say the Chittamatra school is not just helpful to get more used to the idea of the mind, but also to reduce anger and attachment. Because what we're attached to is stuff that's just appearing to our own mind. Think about it. That beautiful person over there, right? I especially especially attachment that is not of an emotional nature. I mean, that's not directed at how we feel with another person, but also with regard to that. But if it's mainly on material objects, like the body, for instance, or other objects we enjoy, then knowing that they're not out there, that they're just appearances to the mind, can greatly reduce these afflictions. All right. Anyway, so that is really the discussion back and forth. I try to just summarize it. So Jimmy says he agrees with Bernd. He says, yes, this danger is true. There's the danger of believing there's just you when you talk about Chittamatra. Materialism creates that divide again, that sense of inherent existence. Yes, so both have their disadvantages. And then Jimmy brings up the AI. Artificial intelligence. Yeah, well, honestly, it's important to discuss this. Because a lot of people believe these AIs so greatly. And I've tried them out. And I have friends who tried them out. Don't rely on AIs when it comes to the Dharma. They have some basic knowledge. But they put stuff in there that sounds great. And it's totally not true. It's unbelievable. I've tried it out. It sounds so good. But honestly, the problem with AI is really they make things up, basically. I mean, I don't know whether they make things up. Maybe they want to answer. They're not going to say, I don't know. So they put something there that kind of makes sense. And you can only tell if you've already studied it. And then you don't need an AI. The point is really, so you need an AI, basically, well, maybe if you've forgotten something and then you read it and you go like, oh, okay, and then you can distinguish between what is correct and what is incorrect. But Jimmy asks, and this goes further than that. Oh, okay, and one more thing. There's so much misinformation on the internet about the Dharma. I mean, anyone can publish a Dharma book. Anyone can. I mean, I'm teaching right now a Lorde class based on these books that have been translated, Science and Philosophy, in the Buddhist classics. And the book that I'm doing right now, I know the translator is amazing, but there were a lot of people involved in the editing, some professor as well. And the words I guess those were his changes, I'm not sure, but oh my God, there's so many mistakes. It's so easily misunderstood. The translation itself is great, but the words are not. The words are so misleading. Yeah, they're not strictly Dharma terms, but they're misunderstood because they have already another meaning. So what does an AI do? It collects this amount, like this huge amount of data from the internet, right? It finds patterns, it finds, similarities, and then it gives an answer. So there's so much, misinformation. I was going to say rubbish, but there's so much misinformation, not rubbish, but misinformation. So what do these AIs do? They can't distinguish. And then based on the AIs giving you misinformation, there are going to be new books now, because everyone feels they can write a Dharma book. Just look up what the foreigner, and write on it. Put your name on the book and wow, you wrote a Dharma book. And even more misinformation. That is so dangerous. That is so dangerous. I've been asked to edit stuff sometimes, and even like older Dharma students, like, wow, I found so many mistakes. So, because many of them, if you really debate it a lot and you discuss this a lot, you can see tiny little kind of inconsistencies, but you may not notice that. Sometimes people like to go into these debate details without having debate, and then you don't debate it, and then you don't notice that. And I don't say I know in any way. I just know little basics. But once you know the basics, you notice some of the mistakes. That there's so much misinformation. In the days when, Buddhism was existed in India, when it hadn't come to Tibet yet, so around the 5th or 6th century, even before that, every book was checked. They had very few books, but the quality was amazing, and it was not. It was actually tied to the tail of a dog when it wasn't accurate. So it's kind of embarrassing if some dog was kind of like pulling this book of yours in the back, right? I mean, it was pretty. I don't know whether that was done, but the point is that quality was of utmost importance. It was not about quantity. And now, so many people write books. So many people, they maybe studied a Buddhist course in university for 3 years, 4 years, let's say, let it be 4 years, but plus other topics. So they have maybe a class once a week or something, and then they write books on Buddhism or translate. And then they want to make up their own vocabulary. And it's like, what are they talking about? And someone reads it, and it's very misleading. And, to tell you my opinion about Jeffrey Hopkins, a lot of people don't like him. A lot of people want to do it different to Jeffrey Hopkins. But I find people who read Jeffrey Hopkins' books really know philosophy. So it doesn't sound like Shakespearean English, no. But it's very close to the Tibetan. He was very precise. I never found any inconsistencies in his books. I don't think so. He researched everything to the dot. I mean, they were so good. And I know some of the modern translators say, oh no, but you can't read this, it's impossible English. Well, like when you write something in modern physics, who's going to come along and says, oh, you can't use that word, that doesn't sound that nice. It's like, you want people to understand. Who cares what it sounds like? It's about the philosophy. And of course, there's some inspirational books you can read every now and then, but don't mistake them, because some translators, they're not very precise, they're very eloquent. And that is important for inspirational texts, where it's not that important about have you used that word or not, and so forth. So there are some texts, it's beautiful to have them translated by someone who uses what, I don't know, you would call proper English, I guess. But Jeffrey Hopkins' writing is so precise. And he was consistent. He didn't use one word one day and then another one the next day. If the word was used in Tibetan, he did that as well. And that is really important, because a lot of the discussions revolve around, you use this word here and you used it there. Is there a difference between the meaning, for instance? So the authors found it very important to get an understanding that it's used here in a different context. But if it's a different word in English altogether, you'd never know what they're talking about. Yeah. So anyway, there's so many stories like that. The advantage I have that I learned Tibetan, so I can always go back and I can understand it, but I know people misunderstand. And therefore AI, now sounding so convincing, makes it even worse. You have all the data of all these books that have been published, Kindle and so forth. This is where it gets its data from. This is where these... So anyway, and Jimmy asked this question. You can have many meaningful discussions with AI about philosophy. I have my doubts, right? Yeah, because unless you know about the philosophy, you don't notice when it's making things up. So, but he asked, can AI become our Lama? Right, I mean, like, people relate to AI like people. That I've heard. I know in Japan people get married to AIs. Yeah, I've heard that. Anyway, that's Japan, but they have some interesting things that you don't find anywhere else. But still, it feels like a person is talking to you. It's very personable, right? The ones that talk to you in particular, like, they speak to you. Anyway, and he says, well, since realizations do not truly exist, therefore they might as well, right? But then I would argue we all have some realizations. Can we all be lamas? Now we're lamas, we have some realizations and they don't exist truly. So even, some animals have realizations. They know where to find their food. They have certain knowledge and understanding. Again, that's unfortunately not enough, because anyone could be a lama then. Realizations are mental states. And that is so different to an AI. So, first of all, I just learned from the internet, as I said earlier, whereas humans, of course, learn from experience, relationships, emotions, and so forth, not just the information they get. They gain deep insight, something an AI can't do. They can't understand. They can just process the information and recognize maybe patterns. Humans understand and feel, also very important. I mean, Buddhism is all about feelings. It may sound weird, like, because in some cultures, I mean, being emotional is something negative. But that is actually talking about emotions in the negative sense. Oh, he's too emotional. Those are negative emotions. No one would say His Holiness is too emotional because he's got so much love and compassion. Right? You wouldn't call that emotional. But he has incredible emotions. These lamas, they have so much love and compassion. And it's their love and compassion. I mean, I don't even know how to describe that. It's, you know, they use the word blessing. But blessing is not a good translation. But it's the best we have. Might as well use it. It actually means, what does it mean, blessing in Tibet? What is the literal translation of blessing? What does it really mean? What is the literal meaning of the Tibetan word blessing? Does anyone know? It means transform into something greater. Huh? So the Lama transforms us into something greater. All right, what? The Lama is kind of giving us their enlightenment? No. But it's just their presence. It's just being around them, listening to teachings, but sometimes also just observing them as an example, how they interact with others. It inspires us. Right? It inspires us. It's like just an ordinary Joe, you know, like on the street. It's like, okay, never mind. They may be friendly and all that, but their mental state is not such that it affects us so profoundly. Don't ask me the science of that. What is the scientific happening? I can't tell you. I'm sure of course there's some science behind it, that even without knowing this person is a high lama, and it's happened. I mean, in some of the documentaries, His Holiness, when he wasn't that known in the past, that they suddenly meet His Holiness and are like, whoa, who's this person? I know one lady, she once took the plane from Delhi to Dharamsala and had this really kind monk next to her, and she was so touched. That was like in the 90s. It was so wonderful, you know, and wow, she was so happy when she arrived at Makarganj. And then she kept seeing him in the shops. Everywhere was his photograph. Right? And she was like, wow, she spent an hour and a half with His Holiness. People don't get an audience for an hour and a half. And he talked to her, you know, and it was just that, wow, that nice person. She was a Buddhist the moment she saw the pictures. Yeah, she got right into it. Didn't need much about the Four Noble Truths. She had met His Holiness. She had spent that time with him. Actually, a lot of people tried to get on that flight, apparently, but they didn't make it. But she did, and she sat next to His Holiness. No idea who he was. Yeah, you see? Changed her into something greater. Blessed her. Something came from it. And I dancing doesn't do that. And I can know so much and like inspire me. It's not going to happen. So that emotion, there's some communication we're not aware of. I mean, of course, it happens even among people. We pick up on things. We don't know how we know. We never question it. We sometimes know a person is upset without them telling us. Whether it's micro expressions, whether there's some energy, I don't know. But our mind is so amazing. The power of our mind, and that's what we're trying to tap into by doing what we're doing, to change our mind to the mind of His Holiness or other great lamas' minds, right? Which is absolutely possible. But the point is here, an AI is not going to do that, like inspiring us. And in fact, I mean, it's scary. They are manipulated, these AIs. There are people controlling them, and they want to control the way we think. They can do that. So don't trust them too much. I mean, use them by all means. Why not? You know, you want to, I don't know, don't want to calculate something, or you can just tell them, calculate this and this and this. You don't even have to type it in, Okay, that's great. Use it in a wise way, but don't believe they can replace a Lama. They may feed you with a lot of misinformation. And of course, an AI doesn't think freely, a human can, etc. So just that, I thought it was important to mention AIs. Don't rely on AIs when it study the Dharma, and once you have the information, you may use them, I don't know, whichever way, if you've forgotten something. And then you know, oh, this is right and this is wrong, because you remember. But don't trust them. Okay. Anyway, I think that was basically it. Yeah, so Tome also gave, again, a beautiful example. I said that earlier about conventional truth. Jimmy, I think, misunderstood that a little bit, but also because Tome used a word. He said, from an ultimatist perspective, things don't exist. But if he had said, ultimately, nothing exists, he would be correct. But ultimate perspective usually means ultimate truth. So here it's a little important with the terminology, but what he said was correct. Phenomena exist, there's a conventional level, and ultimately they don't exist. That is, independently, inherently, they don't. Yeah, and then Jimmy said that this sounds weird to me, the word is invalid, unless they're the true truth. And of course he's right. Yeah, so that was it. There was a little bit of that discussion. Then in the end, Christine asked about the Chittamatra school in more detail, but we'll cover that in more detail. Okay, so just in case you followed these discussions, I thought they were really good. Everyone giving it some thought and having different ideas. So I wanted to share that with you. But now let's go back to the material. And I'm not going to do this every time. I'm not going to go through all the discussions, but I thought there were some important ideas. Oh, and one thing I wanted to add. Varda at some point asked about the 4 types of the path of preparation. Remember, we're right now in preparation for the text. I'm going a little bit through the path of accumulation and path of preparation because the text doesn't mention it in much detail. And on the path of preparation, there are 4 levels. What are they called, the 4 levels?
Heat, forbearance.
Heat, peak, forbearance, Supreme Dharma. Yeah. So what happened was that, Thea very kindly, she posted an excerpt from Tsepa Rinpoche's dictionary, in which these are all mentioned in Tibetan, and then a short explanation is given. In there, okay, now I have to look it up because I didn't. In there, right, just look for it. It's like this entry from a dictionary. Yeah, here we go. So you have the heat level. So the first sign of attaining the wisdom of the path of seeing is felt. All right, so it's like they say the heat, usually they say it's called heat level because the mind realizing emptiness directly on the path of seeing is it's like fire, and you can feel the fire. Basically, you get a sense you're moving closer to a direct realization of emptiness because you conceptually realize emptiness with the union of calm abiding and special insight. So that's fine. Zöpa is also okay. The explanation here. You no longer have fear of emptiness. So you have this incredible confidence instead of fear of emptiness. You overcome that. But the peak level, I don't think it's correct here. The peak level. So although it's Tsepa Rinpoche and it's a really good dictionary, but first of all, I don't know what his source is. It doesn't specify that. But you see, the thing is, there's something called the sign of irreversibility. You studied that at some point. A sign of irreversibility. Irreversibility, yeah. So an irreversible sign, he calls it here, but usually it's the sign of irreversibility. There are certain signs. I'll read you what Gyaltsab says, one of the hard disciples of Lama Tsongkhapas, in his Ornament of the Essence. He says, in terms of aspiration, this irreversible signs means having eliminated the opportunity for the manifest arising of aspiration, seeking liberation for oneself alone. In other words, at a certain point in time, when you reach that sign of irreversibility, irreversible means here you're no longer tempted by self-liberation. There is just not the slightest danger. Although we say, this is a little bit difficult here, there's some debate on that. We say bodhicitta cannot be lost on the path of, on the middling path of accumulation. So pretty much after you've become a bodhisattva, you can't lose bodhicitta. All right, so you cannot actually fall, or you cannot actually change to a path that is only concerned with self-liberation. But it could be an obstacle in your practice. Just every now and then, without actually letting go of bodhicitta, but it could be an obstacle, right? Every now and then having the thought, this is really tiresome, it's not that easy, and kind of like it may creep in a certain way. Maybe that's what they mean here, I'm not sure. Honestly, some of my teachers also don't agree, although the texts are pretty clear, saying pretty much from the very beginning, that is on the middling path of accumulation, bodhicitta cannot be lost. Some of my teachers disagree. They say, of course it can get lost. It can get lost later on. Yeah, Geshe Kelsang is one of them. He feels quite strongly about that. So I've asked my other teachers and they don't agree. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. I have no idea. But from what it talks about here, it's like the sign of irreversibility, which is saying once you reach that, then there's no longer any danger. You definitely, or danger in the sense, of course, from the point of view of the universal vehicle, if you give up the welfare of all sentient beings, but only want to be self-liberated for the time being, that is seen as, well, negative in the sense, of course, it's still amazing, but in comparison to Buddhahood, it's just not the same. So they warn of that. However, it says, so there's even a sign of irreversibility. There's a sign of irreversibility, and that's not on the path of accumulation. Okay? So, anyway, that's the sign of irreversibility. In terms of aspiration, it means you no longer generate the aspiration seeking liberation for yourself alone. No way. Number one. In terms of practice, it means possessing firm realization of distinctive method and wisdom. Right? They are very firm. Your method and wisdom have become very firm. And now it shows, it presents when do you attain this sign of irreversibility? When is that? And Gyaltsabje says there are those of sharp faculty, of sharpest faculty. They attain it on the heat level, not peak, heat level of heat level of the path of preparation. Not, he says here, peak, where one has gained that irreversible sign. No, but it's reversible, like there's a specific term in Tibetan, chilmidobeda. So it's always used in this context. It's not from the point of view of the peak level, it's from the point of view of the heat level. And those of medium faculties from the path of seeing, and those of weaker faculties from the 8th ground onwards, the 8th ground of a bodhisattva. So, heat, path of seeing, or 8th ground bodhisattva, which is only 3 grounds before Buddhahood, depending on your faculty. So some attain it earlier, they're stronger in their practice, and cannot fall from it. I mean, this sounds very abstract and so forth, but it's practical again. Think, you are on that path. The way I spoke to you last time, you are on the bodhisattva path. You are practicing. Your whole life is dedicated to the benefit of all sentient beings. And I know you can all do that because we all had our spiritual moments, inspired maybe, or we had a really good day, we woke up and our practice was so smooth. We could really feel it, right? We all had that. Let it be a few seconds. But oftentimes we remember that. And it was like, wow, I can do it. Even the person I don't like, usually I can, they're in my heart and so forth. We can all do it. So think of that moment just lasting longer. You're now on that path. You're on the path of accumulation. And your love, your compassion, you're so strong. But as it is in everyday life, even on a bodhisattva path, obstacles arise. For a few months, your practice is progressing and it's better and better. And because there are imprints, karmic imprints and obstacles in different forms, usually karmic of course, it'll manifest in the form of suddenly maybe very strong anger, very strong frustration with other people. Previously, whatever they did didn't bother you. Now it does. Sound familiar? It's human. We all have that. Right? Previously, the same thing. Your patience just grew stronger. And then suddenly, that's not what happens. So there are rocks on the road, you travel the highway, it's smooth, and then there's a bit of road, especially when you travel to Delhi, you'll notice that, a piece of highway, and then there's again a lot of gravel, and then you're back to, then there's some potholes and so forth. So Buddhist practice is like that. And there's definitely, it makes sense to me, there's this danger of like, I've got renunciation, I want to get out of samsara, I'm not attached to it, or my attachment is so weak that I really want to get out of samsara. Maybe, eventually I'll enter but for the time being, let's just, right? It's possible, it's tempting. We have those temptations all the time. It's human, it psychologically makes sense. So, am I making that noise? I am, right? Shouldn't move. Stop moving now. So therefore, now it's gone. Okay. The point is, therefore, with this sign of irreversibility, it does make sense that at some point your mind is so why did I talk about that? Sign of irreversibility. Who talks like that? Such a weird term. But when you explain it, it makes sense that at some point your mind is so accustomed that this thought never ever pops up. It's just not an option. Your love, compassion, your wisdom have become so strong that not even the thought arises. So whichever interpretation you follow, the one that says on the path of accumulation, the middling path of accumulation, bodhicitta cannot be lost, you could still say the thought may arise, the temptation is there, and it may actually halter you, that's the word, not halter you, like hold you a little bit, like not prevent you altogether from practicing, but you need some time. You may just need a vacation from it, or you can't practice as effectively, right? It kind of, what's a good word for it? It kind of, Aiden, what do you think? It kind of, sorry to put you on the spot, like you can't go on as smoothly as before. It's kind of like when your car breaks down, you won't be able to, or your car suddenly can only drive really slowly. You know what I mean? So it holds you from, the speed is reduced, in other words. Yeah. So it reduces the speed of your progress in that way. Or you see it in the way Geshe Kelsang, for instance, sees it, saying that you can lose bodhicitta still. It's less likely, okay, but it can happen. And then these signs of irreversibility make more sense, in the sense that, yeah, okay, once you reach that state, okay, no danger. Right? Okay. So let's be realistic. Unfortunately, entering the path of the universal vehicle is just the beginning. It's just the beginning. And there's still going to be a lot of potholes. There are going to be a lot of obstacles. But it gets easier as you progress. Yeah. And at some point you don't mind the potholes. You're able to use them. What's the word? Transform the obstacles, the difficulties into the path. And you become more effective at doing that. Okay. All right, just wanted to mention that I think there's a mistake in that. But I could be wrong, so just to keep an open mind. All right, now going back to where we got to last time. Okay, we've done the heat level, we've got peak. Forbearance, we did as well. Okay, just briefly, heat is clear, peak is clear. Okay, forbearance, no longer fear of samsara. You can no longer be reborn in a lower realm either. And then you have supreme mundane dharma. So why is it called supreme? Well, of all the worldly ordinary path, because everything below the path of seeing is described as mundane or ordinary, mundane or ordinary, simply because you haven't realized reality directly yet. So it's ordinary. Of course, in a way, you're not like an ordinary person in comparison, but the word is used usually in this context, as in you haven't realized emptiness directly. So it's the supreme mundane. It's the supreme mundane. Of all the mundane places, that's the best one you can get before it becomes super mundane. Super mundane or super mundane. Because it's supreme among mundane virtues, being the highest of the mundane or ordinary path. The reason is, of course, that on account of the direct realization of emptiness, the next path, the path of seeing, is a super mundane or Arya path. Okay. So Arya really just means special, super mundane, yeah. Like the other three stages of the path of preparation, supreme mundane dharma can be divided into 3 levels. I guess small, middling, and great. So like stronger one, weaker one, stronger one, and then even greater. I don't know. And as Lama Tsongkhapa's text later on also explains, each of the levels of the supreme mundane dharma, each of the levels of supreme mundane dharma can in turn be further divided into 3, each of them, amounting to 9 in total. I mean, I just say that he hasn't explained in what way, and maybe explained somewhere else. I don't know. Yeah, so of course it makes sense. The mind can be divided in terms of our slow progress, and it's definitely difficult to reach that direct realizations, and you go through different levels. So I don't remember now seeing it explained, but never mind. Okay, so it's called small of small, middling of small, great of small. Okay, great. Never mind. Sounds more eloquent in Tibetan. Anyway, there's not much more to be said about this. I said it's just a short explanation. So the heat, peak, forbearance, and supreme mundane dharma levels of the path of preparation are the same in that they involve conceptually realizing emptiness through the union of tranquil abiding or calm abiding and special insight. Yet they differ in the length of time bodhisattvas have spent familiarizing themselves with that extremely focused realization. So you familiarize yourself more and more with the conceptual understanding of emptiness, right? The more you, again and again, they meditate, again and again they meditate on emptiness. As a result, the levels are distinguished not only by the fact that dualistic appearances become progressively more subtle, so more and more, this sense of distance, emptiness over there, having a generic image, some representation of what emptiness means to you, which is appearing to you, that representation becomes weaker. So actual emptiness, it appears closer. It's closer and closer. I mean, you still have that generic image, stopping you or preventing you from directly realizing emptiness, but emptiness appears clearer and clearer to your mind. As a result, the levels are distinguished not only by the fact that dualistic appearances become progressively more subtle at each stage, but also by the type of misconceptions that practitioners are able to undermine. This is really important. As we've heard, when you realize emptiness directly, that mind is the direct antidote to our afflictions. When you have that mind for the first time, you already eliminate some of the afflictions for good. They're gone forever. Certain types of anger can no longer arise. They're usually described as intellectually acquired one, the one that you developed over time in this life. You have the innate kind of anger, but then based on your understanding, your culture, your philosophical views, and so on, your religion, you may develop on the basis of, for instance, innate anger, an intellectually acquired one. I don't know if you believe whenever I'm angry, I should show that anger with great force. There was, for a while, in modern psychology, they talked about, let your anger out, right? Scream and you know, what is it, punch a pillow or something. And people got angrier in that process, right? It's like they I don't know, developed a rage because they had to be angry, and the psychologist told. So that's pretty much an intellectually acquired one. That's not the one we were born with. And of course, there are other types of attachments, there are other types of wrong views. So those are gone on the path of seeing. Understanding that is important. So think of yourself as a bodhisattva. Now you realize emptiness conceptually, right? You realize it conceptually, but you can't eliminate these afflictions yet. They're still there. But you can undermine them. You can weaken them. Makes sense, doesn't it? Right? You weaken them. I mean, there are other examples, like, let's say you take a shower. As long as the water is cold, the dirt is not coming off. But, it gets a little looser. It softens. So that when the water turns warm, you can totally eliminate it, right? It's true, like just cold water does something. There's like a lot of mud on your arm or something, at least it softens it a little bit. So in the same way, the dirt is still there, using water as an example, that's just an analogy. But the point is, it's possible, like even when it's kind of like a mental cleaning. We mentally clean our mind, we purify our mind of something that's not in the nature of the mind in the first place. By understanding the actual nature of the mind, we remove that which is not in the nature of the mind, and which is only there because we misunderstood the nature of the mind. Therefore, without having realized emptiness directly, we undermine, we weaken those misconceptions. But they're different types. And here it's quite interesting how we can undermine certain misconceptions easier than others. Once you realize emptiness like directly, that's not an issue. But for us in actuality, certain things are easier understood. So let's see. Now, I wrote it down in exactly the way it is in the texts. So this is a little bit awkward. But I didn't want to fool around with it too much to just put it into more colloquial English, if you like. I used just that terminology, but hopefully it's clear. So a conception that apprehends the intrinsic existence of thoroughly afflicted phenomena. So like negative phenomena. Thoroughly afflicted is the term, like afflicted phenomena, afflictions, right? They're thoroughly afflicted. So negative, kind of harmful phenomena as objects of consciousness. So perceiving thoroughly afflicted phenomena, afflictions, as an object of consciousness, and then that being inherently existent, intrinsically existent. Sounds very complicated, I know. It's not so much about understanding it correctly. You'll see why I'm doing this in a moment. So there are minds that hold on to the intrinsic existence of negative stuff being intrinsically an object of consciousness. Right? Or holding on to the inherent existence of negative phenomena, harmful phenomena, being objects of consciousness. Then there are conceptions that apprehend the intrinsic existence of pure phenomena as objects or being objects of consciousness, so pure phenomena. Then there are conceptions that apprehend the intrinsic existence of consciousness that perceives substantially existent phenomena, and we'll come to that. And conception that apprehend the intrinsic existence of consciousnesses that perceive imputed phenomena. I know it's very complicated what I just wrote, but let's see what the explanation is. So these 4 types of ignorance, these 4 types of root misconceptions, that's all they are. They all perceive intrinsic existence, but of different things. Okay? There are afflictive obstructions that bodhisattvas gradually eliminate while progressing through the path of seeing and the path of meditation. Okay, intellectually quiet first, innate later. Okay, on the path of preparation, the union of tranquil abiding and special insight that conceptually realizes emptiness, that conceptually realizing mind, cannot yet eradicate them. So these conceptions cannot be removed from the mind. You realize emptiness conceptually, and therefore you can't. But it can undermine them. It can weaken them. This weakening then allows for their complete removal on the path of seeing and the path of meditation. Of these four, the first is easier to undermine than the second easier than the third, and the third easier than the fourth. Why? Well, that's what we come to. On this basis, the levels of the path of preparation differ in what they can undermine. Right? The heat level undermines the first type, and so forth. All right. The order in which these conceptions are undermined can be clarified by noting what they grasp at. All grasp at inherent existence, but of what? The first 2 apprehend the intrinsic existence of objects of consciousness. Objects of consciousness. Wow, the latter two apprehend the intrinsic existence of consciousness itself. So, what is easier to understand? The lack of inherent existence of objects like shapes, colors, and so forth, versus the lack of inherent existence of the mind. What do you think? Objects. We're so familiar with objects. We're so familiar with objects. We're not familiar with the mind. Wait, that's one thing. In the beginning. But once we become more familiar with objects and mind, and with the mind takes on a special importance. And then again, it's harder to realize the lack of inherent existence of something that is more important. Right? Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, so you're right. Of course, in the very beginning, when we start off of the objects and of the mind initially, the mind, we don't know what the mind is. So understanding the lack of inherent existence is like, yes.
It might depend on the person.
It does depend on the person, that's true, but in general. You know, if you don't believe in the existence of mind, like a lot of people either don't believe in the existence of the mind. I mean, nowadays it's brain and mind is just a side effect of the brain. But it does very much depend on the person. But still, like we don't, even if we believe in the existence of the mind, try to explain it. Try to describe the mind without using the terminology we learned in Buddhism, right? So I can easily take, I don't know, a tree and put it apart and explain its different parts. And once I've taken it apart and I look for an intrinsic essence, I already know these are the leaves, those are the branches, this is the... How do you do that with the mind? For instance, we search for an essence of the mind when we search for inherent existence, right? What is it? Like there's something there from the side of the object, an essence. So we search for it, but first, among which parts of the mind? We don't know enough about the mind, right? We get very extensive explanations in Buddhism, but yeah, there's mind. We accept mind. I know awareness. But then why it doesn't exist inherently? It becomes a little harder because it's not as tangible, right? In general. But some people, of course, if you do a lot of meditation but then people who do a lot of meditation on the mind, I mean, some people are born with the knowledge of their mind, but they probably have done a lot of meditation on the mind. So they may seem just ordinary, but they're probably very highly advanced. Yeah, so I'm saying total beginners. They're probably not that familiar with the mind in general. And then once you become highly advanced, you know the importance of the mind. And then it's really difficult. If something is really important and seen as desirable, to negate, so for instance, a jerk, to realize the lack of inherent existence of a jerk is probably easier than to know or understand the inherent existence of a Buddha. Right? Yeah, so like just an ordinary person, yeah, they don't exist inherently. They don't matter to me. So it's kind of like, yeah, there's no essence. Yeah. Right? It seems easier, especially in the beginning. And then His Holiness? His Holiness doesn't exist inherently? Really hard. His Holiness always says it. I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, I'm not, like he leads us oftentimes in the past. His Holiness talked about, take me apart, there's no Dalai Lama, if you remember. But that's a little harder because we're emotionally very attached, I guess, but also emotionally very strongly connected. But just some guy who's just a jerk, seems easy. Yeah? So these are those two components, familiar versus not familiar. So with the eye, I'm so familiar with my eye. I'm less familiar with the space rocket. So it makes sense, I focus on my eye. But then when I start getting into Dharma practice, love versus anger. Anger is easier, doesn't exist inherently, because it's something I'm pushing away anyway. So usually when we hold on to things, we hold them close to us, they seem more inherently existent in general as ordinary beings then the stuff we kind of want to be aware of, because it's kind of like we're pushing it away to a certain degree. Our mind doesn't exist the way it appears to us. Am I making sense? That these are the two criteria usually: lack of knowledge and not considering important. For those two, no, considering to be important. Those two are more difficult. The lack of inherent existence of those two are more difficult to understand, at least conceptually. Okay, so having said this, the first two apprehend the intrinsic existence of objects of consciousness, while the latter two apprehend the intrinsic existence of consciousness itself. In general, it's easier to realize the lack of intrinsic, maybe I should say for a beginner, easier to realize the lack of intrinsic existence of objects than of consciousness, and so it's also easier to undermine conceptions that grasp at the intrinsic existence of objects than those that grasp at the intrinsic existence of consciousness. And let's face it, what do we do all day long? Are we spending more time how many hours are we awake? Let's say 16 hours we're awake. Do we spend more time watching the mind, or do we spend more time watching objects other than the mind? If you have great mindfulness, then it's probably, but then even then we're watching the objects, right? The mind, like, what am I thinking? Am I having anger? Am I looking at the person in a negative sense? It's not like the mind, of course, as well, but it's a lot about the objects. Being mindful of what are my thoughts about that person? And that's again really the object, isn't it? And then all day long we're looking around, beautiful sights, etc. And in that way, again, we probably spend more time with the sense objects and basically just navigating, like eating, having a shower, Anyway, could debate that. Among the first two, it is easier to realize the lack of intrinsic existence of thoroughly afflicted phenomena, such as the five aggregates of an ordinary person's mind and body are pretty afflicted, obviously, than of completely pure phenomena, such as the five aggregates of a Buddha, and correspondingly easier to undermine conception grasping the former than the latter. Does that make sense? So of the first two are concerned with objects, okay? And then of the objects, the first one refers to afflicted objects and the second to pure objects, right? So that therefore the first two, the emptiness of the first two is easier to understand, and therefore grasping at the inherent existence of the first two is easier to undermine. And then of those first two, one is concerned with thoroughly afflicted and the other one with pure. And again, one is easier to undermine than the other. The first one is easier to undermine than the second. Then among the latter two, it is easier to realize the lack of intrinsic existence of consciousnesses perceiving impermanent things, here substantial, than of consciousnesses perceiving a person as imputed. So the first one means just impermanent things, right? The lack of inherent, so you focus on consciousness, but a consciousness perceiving impermanent things. Consciousness perceiving impermanent phenomena. Then of consciousness perceiving a person as imputed. Consciousness is already more difficult to understand, the lack of inherent existence of the mind. But then, if you think of a mind perceiving something impermanent versus a mind perceiving that a person is imputed, it's harder to understand that a person is imputed than just seeing impermanent things. It's a little bit difficult here what substantial means and what not. That's usually in the commentaries. That's the commentaries I've read. But anyway, the examples are weird, but I didn't want to make up examples here. I think you can find other 4 examples for this type of misconception with regard to, I don't know, X, Y, and Z's inherent existence is easier to undermine than something else. Okay. All right, so even though the path of preparation is characterized by its conceptual realization of emptiness through the union of tranquil abiding and special insight, Bodhisattvas on this level do not devote themselves solely to meditating on emptiness. They also cultivate and strengthen the other 2 factors, great compassion and bodhicitta, together with the 6 perfections and other supporting practices, all of which grow stronger all of which grow stronger at each successive level. The final moment of the path of preparation on the great supreme Dharma level is a union of tranquil abiding and special insight, conceptually realizing emptiness. So the last moment on the path of preparation is the mind realizing emptiness, although you practice other things as well when you arise from the meditation. But the last time you are on the last moment before you reach the path of seeing, a practitioner, you as the practitioner, the Bodhisattva, you enter again into the meditation, the conceptual mind, conceptually realizing emptiness with this union of calm abiding and special insight, that incredible concentration and the same time understanding of emptiness. And then in that same meditation session, you achieve the path of seeing, right? So in the next moment of the same meditative session, your mind is transformed into a union of tranquil abiding and special insight, directly realizing emptiness, thereby giving rise to the first moment of the path of seeing. Right? So let me just summarize what I just said, despite that complication about the undermining. But what we've learned so far, you enter the path of accumulation, the small path of accumulation, when you have bodhicitta. When you have incredible great compassion first and realize you can be of the utmost benefit to other sentient beings if you become a Buddha, and now you have uncontrived bodhicitta, you spontaneously want to become a Buddha. Again and again that mind pops up without meditating on it. It's just there all the time, right? It comes up in your mind. If you want something greatly, I'm sure all of you have had times when you wanted something so badly, you didn't have to reflect on why you wanted it. It just popped up all the time. I guess that can be compared to uncontrived bodhicitta. So now you're on the bodhisattva path. Then your bodhicitta becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And once it's strong enough and it cannot degenerate, according to one interpretation, the most common interpretation, when it can no longer degenerate, you reach the path of the middling path of accumulation. At the same time now you have to realize emptiness. You have to realize emptiness unless you already realized it before. So this is the latest. You have to realize emptiness then. So you work on the realization of emptiness on the small path of accumulation. But just realizing emptiness is not enough. You need very strong concentration. Have to work on calm abiding, tranquil abiding. And once you achieve that, then you generate the union of calm abiding and special insight, where one mind can analyze, but with a very high degree of concentration. Not like us, when we're focused, we can't analyze. When we analyze, we can't be single-pointedly focused. No, you bring those two abilities together in one mind, where you are single-pointedly focused and your analysis is very subtle, like a little fish that doesn't disturb the surface of a still lake. So the still lake is your focused mind, and the little fish is that subtle analysis. And now you can use this mind, that union of calm abiding and special insight, allows you to see things, perceive things that ordinary people can't perceive teachings on the great path of accumulation. As we've heard, you can receive teachings by Buddhas in different worlds, like by getting the full teachings, whatever teaching you need. If you don't find it on YouTube, you find it through your this vision that you have of these great beings, receive teachings. But moreover, you now take that union of calm abiding and special insight that you developed with an object such as the breath, that you now start developing it with emptiness. And once you can again develop a union of calm abiding special insight, focusing on emptiness, you've moved on to the path of preparation. Then you have 4 levels you go through. The first is called the heat. And during the heat level, you start undermining some of the easier conceptions when it comes to holding on to inherent existence. You weaken these. Then you move on to the peak level, right? On that level, and then the next level of conception that are easier undermined, you undermine them, because your realization of emptiness or your mind has become stronger. On the 4th level, forbearance, you can no longer be reborn in the lower realms. You no longer have any fear of emptiness, which you may previously still have at points, like feel a little uncomfortable, especially when you enter into the meditation. That's gone now. And again, the 3rd level of undermining certain misconceptions of intrinsic existence, they are undermined. And then lastly, on the very last level, the subtlest types of misconceptions are weakened. And at the very end, while you practice other things, you practice compassion and love and so forth, go back into the conceptual realization of emptiness again and again. And at some point when you enter that meditation, you arise with a direct realization, or you attain the direct realization of emptiness and are now on the path of seeing. You have now entered the first bodhisattva ground. And this is where the text starts. That's where the text starts. That's why I gave you this explanation, this preliminary explanation, because actually, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, the first 3.5 verses that are the homage, which we discussed in great detail last time, these verses are about great compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. So they indicate these 2 levels, but they never discuss them. So that's why we discuss them here. When we studied this particular topic, we also learned about them first. So it was fine, it was okay that we didn't go into much detail on them. But hopefully I gave you some sense of what these first 2 paths are. Not that difficult to understand. And now we can start with the text. Took a little longer, but what to do. We will now continue with the text. Please note that Acharya Chandakirti's root verses are written in blue bold italics, while Lama Tsongkhapa's illuminating the intent is written in black bold italics. So I just inserted the text and gave explanation. So the general presentation of the grounds, starting with the first ground. The actual body of the treatise. This is how actually in Tibetan, the actual body of the treatise goes before the general presentation of the grounds. In the translation, it comes after. I don't know why. Having completed the preliminary material, we now turn to the main body of the presentation. So what happens here? Now I'm not reading everything, because otherwise you can read on your own, but the text now shifts from the introductory verses that establish great compassion as the object of veneration in this work, to a systematic explanation of the path consciousnesses, beginning with the path of seeing and culminating in the awakening of a Buddha. But actually we don't spend much time on that. We spend most time on emptiness. That's the whole topic. But in the framework, with the framework of the path, it is introduced to us. But basically the 6th chapter, as you know, it's 70% of the text, so it's mainly on emptiness. But this is how Lama Tsongkhapa basically describes it. So the framework adopted is that of the grounds, bhumis or sa in Tibetan, the stages through which a bodhisattva who has directly realized emptiness progresses toward complete Buddhahood. So actually the primary focus lies on these advanced stages, although it does, but the text presents them in a way that makes them relevant to everyone interested in Buddhist study and practice, including those at a beginner's level. That's beautiful. So for instance, on the first ground, what does the Bodhisattva mainly practice of the 6 perfections? Generosity. So and then generosity is presented in a few verses, maybe, forget, 17 verses or more, I forget now, or less. Anyway, so in these verses, it tells us about generosity. What does it mean? But in a different way that we usually hear it in the Lamrim, for instance. Really beautiful. So this is true for a bodhisattva, but for us as well. We can totally relate to it. That's the beauty of it. And then, of course, it goes on through the other stages as well, the other grounds. There are 2 categories. Oh, wait. Although the primary, So the 2 categories of ground. Again, now Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, this is twofold. The general presentation of the grounds, you have the causal grounds and you have the resultant grounds. Also makes sense, causal and resultant. So he distinguishes here 2 types. These are the stages of training. So what do we have to train? What do we have to know? They're called causal because, well, they function as the causes that ripen into the omniscient mind of a Buddha. So we speak therefore in this context, we speak of the Bodhisattva's gradual development, step by step, through the cultivation of bodhicitta, the 6 perfections, and the bodhisattva grounds. So important to understand that step-by-step progress. It's like, again, you want to go somewhere, you want to know where you reach fast, what's the next place. Yeah. So in that sense, be well prepared. Then the resultant ground refers to the ultimate fruition, the perfect awakened mind. That will also be explained. What does it even mean? Otherwise, why do I want to go there? I don't care. I don't know anything about it. So there's the last chapter discusses briefly what that means. So where all obscurations are completely eliminated and all qualities of wisdom and compassion are now fully manifest in our own continuum. Again, we shouldn't think of it as like someone else, but us, right? Again, we can all do this. We had these moments of great compassion. If someone were to ask us, do you want to enter, if I can give you a magic pill, you can now become a bodhisattva, we would all, scream, here, give me the pill. I mean, we're all willing to do it. So therefore, it's good to think of it as being ourselves, like kind of get ourselves used to, habituate to our own mind to thinking this is us. By making this distinction at the outset, the text ensures clarity. Okay, obviously, first we learn what is to be practiced and perfected, so the causal stages, and only then we understand the outcome, which is the resultant ground. All right, so without the structure, the path and its goal could easily be confused. Cause and effect, very important. All right, so what are the causal grounds? This, like the next chapters until the 10th chapter, including the 10th chapter, all cover the causal grounds. Only the 11th chapter deals with Buddhahood. This has 3 parts. How to practice the path according to this system in general. Then practicing on the ordinary passage stage in particular, and presenting the grounds of Arya Bodhisattvas. Right? So the ordinary stage we already covered, and you'll see basically, Lama Tsongkhapa says, already talked about them. Yeah, but this is how the text is structured. So therefore, the immediate concern lies with the causal grounds. These are explained in 3 progressive parts. So what is the first part? What we're going to go through now, what does it go through? Well, how to practice the path according to the system, according to Arya Nagarjuna's Prasangika system in general. How should we practice in general? So Lama Tsongkhapa gives us some advice. But this section also, explains how we should study, reflect on, and practice on Arya Nagarjuna's works. Because we're really studying Nagarjuna. It comes down to studying Nagarjuna. So Chandakirti, of course, Acharya Chandakirti is always saying, it's Nagarjuna, we're studying Nagarjuna, who's described as the second Buddha. And therefore, we're indirectly also studying, of course, the Buddha's teachings. So that's one thing. And this first section also highlights Arya Nagarjuna's presentation of the Bodhisattva path in the Precious Garland and other texts, and advises us to rely on the commentaries that clarify this intent. You remember we spoke about what Acharya Chandakirti did was he explained, yes, mainly Arya Nagarjuna's work, but he supplemented it. He took other explanations from other works by Arya Nagarjuna. Precious Garland, for instance, beautiful text. Then there's a text on Buddha nature called Praise to the Ultimate Expanse, or Praise to Dharmadhatu. Then there's the Compendium of Sutra. Those are texts, they're all translated. We could easily read them in English. Compendium of Sutra, they're all by Nagarjuna, but a little difficult to understand. So if we study this text, then it becomes easier to study them, to read them. Because the kind of rough meaning we've understood. And since they're available in English now, I believe all of them, Compendium of Sutra, I think it's also, has been translated quite recently, I think. Anyway, I'll put footnotes whenever the actual text is mentioned, not here in Precious Garland, I haven't done that yet, but when the text is mentioned in more detail, I'll put a footnote with the name of the English translation, the publisher, the translator, and everything. So you can easily find them if you're interested to read them. All right, so therefore, this very first section, just talking about the grounds in general, Nagarjuna gives a beautiful presentation of what is it exactly he took out, which ideas did he take out, and I explained them in some detail because we already know them. When we studied this text, we already know what these ideas are. So I briefly explained them in the explanations. So that's the first part. Anyway, we'll go through it soon. Then the practice of ordinary persons in particular, here the focus narrows to the practices suitable for those who have not yet attained direct realization of emptiness. That is, bodhisattvas who are still on the ordinary stages, the path of accumulation and path of preparation of the universal vehicle that were explained in the salutation section. So then Lama Tsongkhapa says, someone is arguing, well, now you should actually talk about the path of accumulation and path of preparation. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, well, I did already. Go back to the salutation, and we already covered it as well. And the third is the presentation of the grounds of Arya Bodhisattva. So this section describes the higher stages traversed by those who have directly realized emptiness and thus entered the path of seeing and beyond. So it maps the 10 Bodhisattva grounds and explains the qualities. Okay. So why is this threefold division that Lama Tsongkhapa came up with? It's logical and practical. We need general orientation, we must understand the starting point, and then the progression. Right, so number 2, we must understand the starting point for ordinary individuals, and then lastly, we're shown the progression of the advanced bodhisattvas. Okay. So by distinguishing cause and result, we do not mistake the gradual path for the final attainment. That's also so important to know this gradual, because then we know how to practice. What comes first? What comes second? In a way, by learning that, you can also direct your practice accordingly. If you understand, this is what's important at that stage, that's one that, and you know, all right, what do I need to focus on? Even at the beginner level, because as I said, every advanced practice has a beginner level that we can do right now. But understanding where we should be going and what is more important or what comes first, we can make the adjustments. And that's so important. We can, of course, ask our teacher, but we can't ask them all the time. And we need to develop our inner guru. So important to develop the inner guru, right? The external guru is extremely important as well. But just the external, we're not going to get anywhere. The inner guru is just as, and that's what really helps us to develop that. Okay. By distinguishing cause and result, we do not mistake the gradual path for the final attainment, nor mistake the final attainment as something separable from its causes. The text carefully situates us within the larger framework, showing where we start and how we can progress. I don't know whether that explanation is all necessary, but I just thought it's nice to get that sense of structure. Really appreciate Lama Tsongkhapa's structure, because this is Lama Tsongkhapa, these outlines, these subdivisions, and giving you a good sense of, yeah, this comes first, this comes second. Is this too much? I mean, please say so. Is this explanation that I just gave, it's not difficult, but yeah, okay. I mean, I was a little uncertain about it. Is this too much blah blah in between, or is it helpful? And honestly, please say so, because I could just delete it. I mean, parts of it at least. Yeah. So Arya Nagarjuna, often called the second Buddha, provided the most authoritative explanation of the profound and vast path. By following this system, we safeguard ourselves against mistaken views and ensure that our practice is grounded in authentic reasoning and scripture. So following Arya Nagarjuna, we're safe. He is said to be the trailblazer, the pioneer of the Madhyamaka, but also gives incredible explanations when it comes to the vast path. And of course, we're relying on the teachings of the Buddha, but the teachings of the Buddha were so extensive, 84,000 different sutras or teachings, if not more, and given in a style that we're not familiar with, so it's quite difficult. Of course, we're no longer familiar with Nagarjuna's style, but he kind of brought it, he summarized it a little bit, brought it together in relatively few texts, not 84,000 different. Really, there's 4 texts we basically mainly rely on, as you'll see. And a few more by some other authors, but Given that it's been 2,600 years since the Buddha has passed away, the texts we should mainly focus on are not that many. 10, 12? So it doesn't seem as overwhelming. We could be totally overwhelmed. After the Buddha had passed away, I'm pretty sure his disciples were very much overwhelmed by the sheer amount, because the Buddha taught spontaneously. Whenever he encountered someone, according to their interests, their predispositions, their karma, he taught them. And these teachings were recorded not technically recorded, but mentally. That was a time when a lot of the great practitioners that the Buddha taught had very deep levels of concentration, deeper than karma binding. Deeper than karma binding. And one beautiful side effect or benefit, advantage of this type of concentration is what? Photographic memory. Photographic memory. I mean, why don't we have photographic memory? Because we're so distracted. Pretty obvious. If you're really focused, and if you listen to a teaching, like, I don't know whether you've ever translated for anyone, if you've ever done translation. I'm not talking about simultaneous, but consecutive translation. I usually make notes because I don't trust my own mind. But there were situations when I couldn't take notes. And I was able actually to remember everything the person had said. First of all, because it made sense, one step to the other, one step leads to the next, but also was because I was able to focus in that moment. So in the beginning, it was better than later on. So if it went on forever, after half an hour, I was like, ew, especially not taking notes. But the very beginning, the more focused I was, the more I was able to remember everything the person had said, especially if it was logically kind of, and the teachings of the Buddha were, of course. So therefore, people had not just my almost no concentration whatsoever. No, people had these deep levels of concentration. So not only could they remember immediately after a Buddha gave a teaching, the whole thing, but they could also retain that memory, and were therefore able later on to recall what the Buddha had said when it was written down. So that's pretty reliable. Mistakes could have crept in, but that's why we had Nagarjuna, who then logically made sense of everything, and being the second Buddha, he presented everything to us in a very accessible way. And he's seen as that authority, that incredible authority. We can trust Nagarjuna. And if any kind of text is a contradiction in Nagarjuna, well, no need to study it, right? So it makes it a little easier. Okay. So this is basically, so how to practice the path. This is an outline. The outlines are always underlined. So how to practice the path according to the system in general. Right? Lama Tsongkhapa is now explaining how to do this. So the text itself says, if in this treatise here, the treatise is Acharya Chandrakirti's treatise. This is entering into the middle way. The profound and vast path of the Bodhisattva are established by following Nagarjuna. So Chandrakirti's text, he follows Nagarjuna. And he adds the profound and vast path of the Bodhisattva based on Nagarjuna. The question arises as to what kind of stages of the path leading to Buddhahood is upheld within the Savior Nagarjuna system. What is he actually teaching? Right? So Lama Tsongkhapa basically affirms that this treatise, Entering the Middle Way, Chandrakirti's text, explains the Bodhisattva path in both its aspects, the profound, wisdom realizing emptiness, and the vast, such as the practices of great compassion and so forth. Both are taught in reliance on Arya Nagarjuna's system. Okay, so we need to really understand that. It has to become clear. It's Nagarjuna we're mainly following. This naturally raises a question. If Arya Nagarjuna is taken as the authority, then what stages of the path to enlightenment did Nagarjuna himself emphasize? This question matters because different Buddhist traditions and masters highlight different types of path. Not every Buddhist tradition follows Nagarjuna, which doesn't mean it's wrong, but if we follow this particular system, the Nanda tradition, we follow Nagarjuna, right? It's like being sick and going to a world-renowned doctor, Arya Nagarjuna. If we trust him as our guide, then the natural question is, what medicine and treatment plan does he prescribe? I think the doctor is a good idea because we're having a mental problem. We're mentally sick, right? I mean, we talk about mental sickness like autism and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. We all have that. In comparison to a Buddha, we're all autistic. In comparison, we're all, like whatever the symptoms are. I mean, we hallucinate, we have lots of contradictory views, we are narcissistic, right? What else? We're depressed at times, and Buddha, no way. I mean, all the mental diseases, usually we give them a name when they're slightly stronger than other people as the generality has. But I think it's so interesting. Even addiction. I once participated in a group, one of my aunts, she's a recovering, you don't say that, a recovering alcoholic. She's dependent alcohol. What do you call that? That's a nicer word now. She's dependent on yeah, okay. So, but she's no longer drinking. And she's part of a group, or part of a self-help group, and they practice mindfulness. So they asked me to come. But I had to first learn about what it is like. I don't know the first thing about, being dependent on alcohol. Until I thought, when I learned about it, I read a book about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not dependent on alcohol, but I'm an addict. I'm so an addict. A food addict, a coffee addict, comfortable bed, shower addict. I mean, I'm addicted. I have attachment. We're all addicted. So I thought, I'm not that different. I'm an addict, right? So the thing is, then whenever I learned about, or sometimes read something about certain mental, impairments, I have some of that. To a certain degree, I've got that as well. I've got times when I'm like, ooh, everything is wonderful. And then, like manic depression, whatever you want. So I have all of this. I recognize myself in every single one. Sometimes I just can't read people. I just don't get it. It's so obvious and I still don't get it. Right? But, so it's like, I taught it as being of the spectrum. But in comparison to a Buddha, I'm right in it. I'm right in it. You see? So basically, physically, also our physical problems come from our mental. Right? The fact that we do get sick, that we have this body in the first place, comes because we have this mind. So the Dharma is like medicine, which unfortunately no one can kind of pour into us or something. And we have to take it. We have to take it. So we have a doctor that tells us what to do. We're trying to discover our inner doctor, right? Have that external person who guides us. And now we're taking the medicine. That's what we have to do. And there's for those who really getting closer to having a really healthy body, well, we do different, similar things. Exercising applies to a bodhisattva on the highest level as it does for us, if you take it just from a medicinal point of view. That's why we learn about it. We learn about it to be able to heal ourselves, basically. But by relying on the Buddha's words, of course, the Nagarjuna and so forth, the doctor's words. So it's like being sick. Now we need to find out, what is the treatment? Is it the right treatment for me? Do I want to take that treatment? Okay. The purpose of establishing the system of the second Buddha Nagarjuna and so on, so others as well, of course, by means of study and critical reflection, is to ensure that we find deep conviction in the method of practicing the perfect path, so that we cannot be led astray by deceptive false path. So easy. Even among people who practice Buddhism, I've met people, I mean, not really Tibetans, because they wouldn't tell me that, but I've met Westerners totally led astray. Some gurus, some woes, I mean, yeah, some practices that can be dangerous. Being introduced to Tantra too early by someone who's not qualified, and I mean, there's so much. Therefore, it's important to generate our inner guru so that doesn't happen to us. We can discern. We know this is in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha and Nagarjuna, according to these, very important, that you're not led astray by some quack, like some doctor who's not a doctor. Yeah. So our Nagarjuna is often called the second Buddha because of his unparalleled explanation of the middle way, or Madhyamika. But merely knowing that his system exists is not enough, of course. So it's important we study it carefully and reflect on it critically. First, learn about it, right? Take your time and learn about it. You don't have to know it right away. You have your entire life. Our lamas are such good examples. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama, again and again, you see photographs of His Holiness with the text in front of him. I don't know nowadays, I'm pretty sure, of course he still reads the text, I'm pretty sure, of course. So His Holiness, wherever he travels, certain books are with him. He's always reading it again and again and again. And if you do that, if you even read the same text, you always get something else, get something different. But he studies some of these important, like Nagarjuna and so forth. So the lamas are also an example for us. That's how we should do it. Don't put the books too far away. Have them nearby, and every now and then, if you've got some time, read them. Not with like, I still don't know, right? Like with this kind of expectation to be a scholar right away. No, just don't even think about it. Who cares you're not? You're not. And even if you're a scholar, there's always someone who knows better. Right? Even if you know the Dharma, there's always someone who knows better. At the very least, or at the very last, the Buddha. So don't compare yourself, but deepen your understanding. And every time you read it again, you have a better understanding. So many of my teachers who are not high lamas even, they say they always have their books nearby. And one of my teachers says, if I die, bury me with the Lamrim Chemo, for instance. He would say, I want to be buried with this book, or burned with this book. Should be near me, right? Yeah. So the book, not just the words, of course, but the actual meaning, and to reflect on that. So study carefully and reflect on it critically. Critically important. Don't take anything on faith. Reflection here does not mean blind faith, but thoughtful analysis, testing his reasoning, Nagarjuna's reasoning, against logic and your personal experience until certainty arises. Yeah? And of course, there are deeper levels, but don't just, this is too difficult, I give up, okay, all right, I just understand that, but I'm not going to give it up. I may stay something else for the time being. We're so impatient in the West. We're so impatient. When you went to elementary school, you were not impatient that you didn't know how to read and write. That's when we were the most patient. But now we're like educated, we have a job, and suddenly we don't know anything when it comes to the Dharma. That can be frustrating. Like, the other people know and I don't know, this is so frustrating. Who cares? Who cares? They also didn't know at some point. They started earlier on, okay. If you do the same, don't compare yourself in that way. I mean, compare yourself by going, how great, they studied that. I want to do the same thing. That's a nice comparison. But not like, oh no, I don't want to study that, they're so much better. That's not the right attitude. With joy, basically, right? Like, wow, allow yourself to be inspired by those people. They help you. You can ask them, right? They can help you, they can inspire you. And then just take your time and make sure you enjoy doing it. And when you don't enjoy it, put the book aside and have some tea. Okay? All right. Why? Okay, also we can have some questions in a minute. Why is this important? Because once we have a deep inner conviction that Arya Nagarjuna's explanation of the path is correct, we're safeguarded from being misled by false path. That is, teachings that deviate from the authentic method to achieve the best possible or optimal mental health. Yeah, like following an AI. Right? You don't know. It sounds really good. I mean, it puts it in a way, it could be from His Holiness's book. Sure, the style is taken from, of course, all the data is online, taken as almost as book. It talks like, but it's totally misleading, wrong. So you can know that by learning the teachings yourself. This shows the great importance, teaching that deviate from the authentic method to achieve the best possible or optimal mental health. That's what we're looking for, it's mental health. Buddhism is a form of psychology. This shows the great importance of thorough understanding. Conviction in the past must come from reasoning and analysis, not from devotion alone. Devotion is secondary. Devotion keeps us going. Devotion is healthy. It's emotionally very healthy. That's why it's considered important. So Buddhism is described a religion because it has devotion. But devotion only because it's good for us. That sense of awe, that sense of inspiration, wants us to move beyond the ordinary materialism. It's not about the Lama wants have all these people being devoted to them. The Lama doesn't, if it's a qualified Lama, and Lama and qualified Lama mean the same thing, so a Lama doesn't care. It's not for their benefit. You bow to them or you spit at them, they don't care, no difference. Right? Especially a highly advanced Lama, his holiness, I'm very sure, he couldn't care less. You spit at his holiness, he would only be worried if you spit at him because of the negativity that you accumulate. Therefore, this devotion, it allows us to access a deeper level of our mind. It goes beyond the ordinary day-to-day kind of attachment and desire and so forth. Does that make sense? There must be more to life. That's it. That's why we're here. We're not in Goa on the beach, turning into tandoori chicken. No. No, we're here. Because we realize there's something more. Yeah? And these states of minds are just psychologically very healthy. Studying Arya Nagarjuna's system carefully is like fully grasping a doctor's diagnosis and treatment plan. If we understand how the therapy works and why it is effective, we won't be deceived by quacks or by someone offering ineffective or harmful medicine on Amazon or whatever. Our conviction protects us. Yeah? It's the best protection. And we can all get there. But that's what's important. So Nagarjuna is basically saying that. And okay, Lama Tsongkhapa is not Nagarjuna, sorry. Lama Tsongkhapa is basically saying that. That's how we should practice Arya Nagarjuna, this conviction. So here Lama Tsongkhapa is advising us. He's not just all about study. And he says it's not about collecting information and being able to debate. Later on he says it's just a tool. Don't get stuck in that. Don't get stuck in that. It's an incredibly powerful tool. But every tool, it's like doing retreat is also a tool. It doesn't mean if you do retreat that you become a better person. In fact, I once met someone, and so there's some difficulty, like sometimes between the different traditions, criticizing each other. And as we see later on, that is an incredible negativity. To criticize, yes, it's called abandoning the Dharma. And the non-virtue from that is very difficult to purify. We'll see why that is the case. So in every tradition, there's a slightly different approach. And they're all valuable, they all work. Look at the lamas, they're amazing. In every tradition, you have the most amazing lamas. Kagyu, Sakya, Nyingma, Geluk, you do. But sometimes people, when they don't fully understand, they criticize each other. And that is such a mistake, because you're putting obstacles in your own way. Criticize the people, that's one thing. Criticize yourself, that's also always a good place to start. You see, study is a tool. And yes, I have met people, and I include myself, not really taking the meaning too hard, enjoying the debate and getting caught up in just that, oh, it's so much fun. And it really takes some effort to go beyond just these words and just thinking of, and taking it as personal advice. That's difficult. It's a tool. And some of my classmates, when they started off, they were a little difficult and they were rough. that came from areas that were tough, like, yeah, I had some real compass. One of them, he once got so angry, he threw his tape recorder against the wall. And his precious tape recorder was gone because he was so angry. But then throughout the years, he became so subdued. He totally changed. Such a kind and gentle person. He was very different in the beginning. So the teachings had an influence on him. Definitely. So, but then there's some, of course, the danger is that maybe you become famous and you become this great debater and so forth. You can also become arrogant. That's also happened. It can happen. But it can also happen when you go into retreat. For me, Jetsunma Tenzin Pamo is not so special because she did those years and years of retreat. What is so special about her? That she took these years of retreat and really transformed her mind and transformed her into this special person. But I remember some years ago, I met a woman when we were studying in Sherabling. Well, there were some teachings by Taisita Rinpoche, and many people had come together to receive these teachings. And I met so many wonderful people there, great practitioners. We ate together. Our class, we were studying parts of the Kagyu tradition, but we didn't attend the teachings. But we all ate together under a huge tent. And I met wonderful people. But I remember meeting this one lady, and she was really difficult. I don't want to go into details, but very difficult. And people had a hard time. They kind of tried to avoid her a little bit. She was a little aggressive and angry and critical and so forth. And so I talked to someone who knew her for many years. And I said, he told me she's doing a lot of retreat. She does retreat all the time. She had been doing retreat for 12 years. But he kind of implied that she's a little difficult. And I said, well, she was probably a lot worse before that. She's done 12 years retreat. And he said, no, she was much nicer before. And I was like, well, so, right? Retreat is a tool. It's a wonderful tool. But if we don't do the practice in order to transform the mind and check again and really then we haven't used the tool effectively. So they're all tools. And for everyone, one tool works better, another works better. We should all be doing retreat at some point, of course. But studying can also be helpful. And for some people, study is not helpful. It can be too confusing. They do some, but too much becomes too theoretical, and they should. So there's no one way that works for everyone. Just as there's no one medicine that works for everyone. But understanding that they're all tools meant to transform the mind. So just check your own mind. Are you transforming it, or is it getting worse? Does your medicine turn into poison? Right? Instead of using poison as medicine, we're using medicine as poison. There are certain practices in Buddhism that if we started them now, they would turn into poison, like certain tantric practices. We have to be careful, like using attachment into the path. That is like using poison and turning it into medicine. But there are practices we can do right now. And if we use these and we turn them into poison, we're really stupid. Turning medicine into poison. Right? Okay, great. Got a little bit more time for questions. I'm checking whether there are questions in the discussion group.
Yeah, I have a question. There is a question here.
Oh, okay. Yes, please. Yes, Bea? B? Yeah.
I'm asking this question in the spirit of wanting to understand, not to denigrate anybody.
No, it's okay.
Okay. And we know that in Buddhist practices, what is most important is determining the view.
Yes.
And as we know, the view are not described the same way by different lineages.
Right.
But they all say they follow Nagarjuna. So my curiosity is, did Ayam Nagarjuna in his writing specifically give a sign to prove emptiness of inherent existence? For example, the one syllogism that I've heard I may not get it completely correctly. I is empty of inherent existence because it is not one with the aggregate or different from the aggregate.
Yes.
Now, where did this syllogism come from?
Okay, all right. So your question is, let me repeat the question first for the recording, but also to make sure I don't misunderstand. So you're asking, first of all, different traditions, in particular in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they describe emptiness, but they describe emptiness quite differently. So how is that possible? If it's the same emptiness, if they all claim or they all say we follow Nagarjuna, how can they be explained differently? Okay, one question. And then also, Nagarjuna, in his writings, well, for instance, in you mentioned the fundamental wisdom, that's like one of the main teachings on emptiness. There are other ones as well. So where does it say, for instance, when you have the logical reasoning, let's say the person doesn't exist, the I doesn't exist inherently because it's not one with the aggregates or not different. This is in the fundamental wisdom. The Tathagata is not one with the body and mind. The Tathagata is not. I can look up the particular verse. So it gives the different opportunity, like saying the Tathagata, he uses the Buddha, which is more difficult to realize the lack of inherent existence of the Buddha. I have to look up, is it verse 20, is it chapter 22 or 24? I can do it right away. Wait, I'll find the German translation of it. Fundamental wisdom. Sorry, I have to do it again. I made a mistake. Fundamental wisdom. I don't find it. Fundamental wisdom. No, I don't find it right away. I did translate it into German, so then I have the Tibetan in there, and I can easily find it. But in the meantime, okay, I'll show you the verse if I find it. But the point is, the different traditions, yes, they describe it differently. But let's face it. Okay, so Nagarjuna used a particular vocabulary that was helpful for people when he taught. 2nd century, let's say 2nd century AD of this common era. And then and then it was passed on by different masters, and language changes, of course, language changes, as we all know. The way a teacher teaches nowadays versus I'm not talking about just the Dharma, but other topics, very different from like 800 years ago, different style. And so likewise, the style was changed, and these commentaries would always explain it according to a particular time, and then people could go back to study Nagarjuna. And eventually Buddhism came to Tibet. Historically, in terms of the historical development, first there was the Nyingma, then there was I think it was Sakya, then it was Kagyu, then it was Gelug. But not just that in chronologically they developed at a different time, but it was also they came from different teachers from except Gelug. Lama Tsongkhapa didn't travel to India. He studied with the masters of all three traditions and started his own tradition. But the others all had a teacher somewhere in India, even without traveling there, but there was some connection. Virupa or Naropa, right? And so forth. So they presented the Dharma slightly differently. Sometimes the emphasis is more on the ultimate truth, emphasizing conventional truth not to the same degree, because some people find that more helpful. They don't fall easily into once they hear emptiness, they don't fall into the extreme of nihilism as easily as others do. So then you have traditions such as in the Nyingma, in the Kagyu, where they're very much focused on lack of inherent existence. They even say conventional phenomena don't exist. But when we debated it with them, they were actually saying the same thing. They were saying they only exist from the perspective of a particular mind. Now, for some people that is really helpful, and in the end we do agree. but it appears differently to the mind. And Lama Tsongkhapa recognized, he does criticize this, but not to the people practicing it, but to the people who are open to the Gelug, who find that approach too difficult to understand. They would easily fall into the extreme of nihilism. They needed more focus on conventional truth. So the other systems are very important for those who don't fall into the extreme of nihilism that easily, whereas Lama Tsongkhapa's view is, who maybe fall easier into the extreme of reification, whereas Lama Tsongkhapa's view, because he emphasizes conventional truth so much, he addresses those who have that difficulty. Right? It's only for the sake of disciples. When I studied the Kagyu tradition, I had a hard time. I just didn't have the imprints. But I knew plenty of people who were like, that makes perfect sense to me. Gelug doesn't. So when we discussed it, we pretty much felt we were talking about the same thing. Even with the monks, like I would go to class and I'd be like, the teacher would say something and I'm like, oh, that is so wrong. I'm going to debate and I'll show these monks that they're wrong. And then it was like, we debated, and we're like, oh, yeah, we both agree. We just said it in a different way. One with the emphasis more on this and one with the emphasis. So in the end, it came down to the same thing. But for me, one approach was easier and for them, another one was. So it's a different way. And what does it say? It's beyond words, it's beyond ordinary thought, it's inexpressible, right? So in actuality, we're using just words that are not getting at the actual thing, but that's the closest we can get. And then based on that, we develop some understanding, and that understanding needs to be deepened so that we gain realization that it's actually, again, beyond words. Does that make sense? So B, that's an important question there for you. Right. It's just helpful for different people. You can say, you could talk about, you can climb the same mountain using different roads. If you use that analogy, that would also work in that case. So the top of the mountain is understanding emptiness, but whether you come this way or another way, it just depends your preference. Yeah, and I looked for it in English. It should be in German. Okay, just a sec. So I still want to give you that particular verse, which is very clear. Which is very clear, grundlegende Weisheit, okay. Which is very clear in English. And then you just formulate, this is so funny. Obstacles. Weisheit. Okay. Grundlegende Weisheit. All right.
Someone posted in the group chat the verse.
Pardon? Someone wrote it already? Oh, there he is. Very good. Linda, thank you. Very good. What verse is that? Chapter 22, verse 1. Yes. Chapter 22, verse 1. He's the Tathagata. So he is not the aggregates, nor other than the aggregates. No aggregates are there in him, and the aggregates, he is not found. The Tathagata is not the owner of the aggregates. What then is the Tathagata? So basically, okay, on the basis of that, B, you can formulate a syllogism. So the Tathagata doesn't exist inherently from before. It's obvious that's what he's talking about, right? Not so much the words he's using, but just from the meaning. So why is he doesn't exist inherently? Because he's not the aggregates and he's not other than the aggregates. Now, you could put all these reasonings, you could summarize them into two. It's not different from the aggregates, not one with the aggregates. And all of these reasonings are included in that. So you can formulate it in the form of the reasoning you have, but you can also take the fivefold reasoning or the sevenfold reasoning. Chandrakirti added two more reasonings that we'll find in here. They're implied in this, but not spelled out. Yeah. So Arya Nagarjuna, we must not. Thank you very much. Oh no, it's mine. Arya Nagarjuna. You see, like at the time when he taught. He wrote this text, but don't think he just said like, okay, read this and be done with it. He taught it. He taught this text, he taught this, he gave teachings on this, I'm pretty sure, to his disciples, and they understood, right? And based on that, they wrote commentaries. But you know, paper and pen were expensive. The best way to get the book was to memorize it. So it should be short, it should be easy to memorize, so have a meter, not put in too many details, it's very difficult to memorize then. And so people could easily memorize it, and certain words were omitted. But you knew, you had studied this, you had memorized the root text, and now when I read this, I know, I mean, like, this one verse, I know it means lack of inherent existence. I studied this as part of the study here. I don't need the details. But the point is, if I just remember this, I can meditate on it, especially if I don't have the book to look at it, which was the case so many years ago. So that's what you understand from it. Does that make sense, B? It's all in here. But that's why you study this. And once you have done that, you say, oh, this is the verse where the syllogism is. So, chapter 22, verse 1. That's the syllogism. All right, sorry, we don't have time for more questions. And if there are any...
No.
Okay, Jimmy is sending a message to B. Lost audio.
Video was fine.
Video keeps cutting out?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Unstable connection. Patchy. All right, sorry. Okay, thank you very much. And let's dedicate all the virtue we've accumulated on the way to becoming a Buddha. Sorry. Where are the prayers? Here. Okay. And of course, again, we focus first on the long life of our kind gurus. Here, specifically mentioning His Holiness, but you should focus on all great lamas. May they continue the embodiment of the teachings. May they continue to be among us, to inspire and guide us through their words, but also through their examples. And then the rest is the usual prayers. So, in the snow-encircled land, you are the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara Denzin Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the precious view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right, thank you, and enjoy your weekend. What's left of it.